But again, yeah, Sunday sermon. So what we do is we talk about some obscure parts of the Bible, some parts that people probably don't know, haven't heard before, and we just try to look at them from, shall we say, a logical point of view. We're not here to make fun of religion or anything like that. We're just trying to get a better grasp on some of the things that come up, as well as have a little fun with some of the stories that are just crazy. They're stories that I've never heard. Most people have never heard. They're really strange, and I think it's interesting to tell people about them. So that's what we're gonna do: is tell people about some of these crazy stories and have a little fun with it. So this week is a little more serious. We're gonna talk about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that is one that is touchy because it has been used as the basis to discriminate against homosexual people for I can't even tell you a time frame, just for as long as Christians have been discriminating against homosexuals, they've been citing this passage. So we're going to take a look at that today and basically prove that it's bullshit. And if you're a bigot, you're a bigot. It sucks. You suck. Just own it. Don't try to cite obscure text to justify your bigotry. If you want to be a bigot, nobody can stop you. And you're disgusting. So just do it, but just own it. Be a bad person. Don't try to hide behind some obscure text in the Bible as a justification for why your bigotry is totally cool. That's what I have to say about that. But before we get to that, we have our segment called The Rule of the Law. Our friend Bale asked us to do this, and it's something that he was really interested in, is all the crazy laws that are in the Bible that, people are expected to follow, but they don't tend to make a lot of sense. They just seem really strange. So let's take a look at this week's rule of the law. We got our handy dandy little aid here. So this week's rule of the law, this one, guys, this one is strange. It's one I actually had to really look a lot into, and I'm gonna be completely honest on this one. I don't know that there's really a good explanation for it. I think at best this one is murky. At best this one is confusing. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this one. So I'm gonna do my best here. This one is interesting. So it comes to us from the book of the law, Deuteronomy, our favorite. So Deuteronomy 25:11 through 12. When men strive together one with another, and the wife of the one draweth near for to deliver her husband out of the hand of him that smiteth him, and putteth forth her hand, and taketh him by the secrets, thou shalt cut off her hand, thine eye shall not pity her. That is a lot. There's just a fucking load of stuff there. So this is the King James, which the these and thous and all that stuff can make it a little thick for some people. So let's try and look at this from the New King James version, or the New Internet. I believe they all went with the New International Standard. I don't even know now, but that one is a little bit easier to digest. Let's see what that one says. If two men are fighting, and the wife of the one steps in to rescue her husband from the one striking him, and she reaches out her hand and grabs his testicles, you are to cut off her hand. You must show no pity. So that's what it is. If two men are having a fight, shout out Kirk Cummings, welcome, welcome. So if two men are fighting, and the wife of one steps in and grabs the testicles of one of the guys that are fighting, you're supposed to cut her hand off. That seems super fucking specific. Like, that's really specific. If two guys are in a fight and one of their wives jumps in and grabs somebody's testicles, we have to cut her hand off. Like, again, the Bible was supposed to be relatable. Yeah, what if fighter one grabs the? That's what I'm saying. You're exactly right, Kurt. Like, it's so specific that if the woman grabs the guy's junk while she's fighting a guy, notice that that's not the scenario here. It's the two men are fighting, and the woman jumps in and grabs one of their junk. You have to cut her hand off. It's so fucking out of left field. Or is it? You see, there's a little more to it than that. You see, in Hebrew times, the ability to procreate was the most important thing. I was hanging out with some friends yesterday, and we mentioned the whole be fruitful and multiply phrase in the Bible. And it's a big deal, absolutely, that, procreation was God's biggest thing. That was part of how the Israelites were going to take over the land of Canaan, is there was going to be more of them than, God was going to bless their numbers, and there was going to be a lot of them. So the ability to procreate was a very big deal. Also, it was such a big deal that not only was it a commandment, but if you couldn't, it was a blight on your existence. There are numerous text passages. We could go on about this all day, and it would be really weird. I don't want to, so we're not going to. But there are a whole lot of segments in the Bible about if a man is impotent, if a man is deformed in his penis in some way, he cannot go inside the temple to worship. He is considered unclean. He cannot be a priest. There's a whole host of Hebrew society that he can't participate in because he has a weird dong. And so that got me thinking about these guys. All these guys wouldn't be able to enter the temple because they had weird dongs. Like, that's what's going on here. So the penis was super important to the Israelites. In case, the misogyny from last week's episode really hadn't dawned on you, how important is it? You can't even enter the temple through, and again, it's through something that's through no fault of your own. Just, if you are misshapen or not working down there in any way, God thinks you're less than. That's the message here, and that's fucked up. But that's the message. So back to what we're talking about. Yeah, I thought he really fit in. I don't think any of those guys should probably be in the top. Oh, Phil Kessel's cool. The rest of them I'm not so sure about. But okay. So is that what we're going with here? Like, is it that they're basically saying the junk is so sacred, if somebody grabs it in a fight, you cut their hand off? But why did they only mention the woman? That also seems weird, right? Let's go a little further into the text and see if we can make some sense of it, okay? The word that is used in the actual Hebrew text to describe the woman grabbing the dude's junk is her kaf. You should cut her kaf off. Now, kaf does not actually mean hand, but palm or hollow area. In some instances, it's even been referred to as a woman's womb because that is the hollow area where the baby then grows. You know how biology works. It's also been used to mean the open area of a sling or a wash basin. So it's about as clear as mud what they're actually talking about there. Now, I've read some other theories from some different theologians that have taken that to mean that they didn't actually mean cutting her hand off, but just scarring her palm as almost like a scarlet letter of, yeah, she's a testicle grabber. Or it had been taken to mean, this is the one that really got me. I honestly wasn't sure how to process this one, but that it would mean that the woman should have her pubic hair publicly shaved as a way of humiliating her for grabbing this guy's junk. Now, those seem to be a bit more fringe theories, and again, there's not a lot to support either one of them. Oh, Lord Stanley's going to join us this morning. So, it's not, really. Those are probably out of left field, but again, it shows you how convoluted this shit is. That we've got these supposed laws, and no one knows what they fucking mean. So, I went in to the Hebrew text, and I called a good buddy of mine, Rabbi Chuck, and he basically helped me come up with this incredibly easy to understand reading of that verse. What in parentheses here are all the words that are in dispute in this story and what they couldn't mean. Now let's read them with all of them there, and you can see how many different meanings there actually are to what this could be. So, if men or husbands, so right there, we don't know. Are these two guys related? Because husbands in that instance would probably mean that it's two brothers fighting, are quarreling, striving. So now maybe it's not a physical fight. Maybe it's just a verbal fight. Together, a man and his brother, so we do know that they're brothers now, and that the woman wife of one of them, now the woman of him, that also is interesting because that could technically mean his sister. The sister would be the woman of the man, or it could be his concubine, doesn't necessarily have to be his wife, or it could be his wife. Yes, quarreling or striving. And her man or husband, so again, it could be her brother, from the hand of one is beating, smiting, striking down. Now, those vary in levels of violence there. Oh, welcome, Bale. We appreciate you tuning in. So, is he beating him? Is he smiting him, which, would basically mean is he killing him? Or is he striking him down, which would also be, those are different levels of violence. Is this just a fight, like two guys scuffling? Or is the one going to fucking kill the other guy, and that's why she's grabbing his testicles? This is where it really gets interesting to me. And she stretches out her hand and seizes, grabs, makes firm. That's interesting. Or strengthens. That, again, sounds way more sexual than what we were talking about before. Like, all of a sudden, it's not these two guys are fighting and she reaches down and grabs one by the junk. Now, it's these two guys are fighting and she's got one of them aroused. That's a whole different thing. And then, yes, those are three very, very different things, Kurt, but yet the word that is used could mean all three. And we have to try and intune the author's intent, and it's kind of tricky, right? And so then, she makes firm or strengthens his genitals, then you will cut off or trim her palm or hollow basin. And trim, this is where the guy has got the idea. Trimming her hollow basin, some people have put together, that you should shave her pubic hair. Basically, if two guys are fighting and a woman jumps in and grabs one of them by the junk, which would be an embarrassing way to lose a fight, let's be honest, then you have to get your pubic hair shaved in public, which also seems insane, right? So if your husband is striving with your brother, you have a duty to give him a coral boner. Yes, that is what's going on here. So clearly, this makes no fucking sense. So let's move along here. What we can really intune from this. Near East case law was based on Near East law was based on case law, not legislation. There's no such. They didn't just make laws in the Near East. What they did was give you cases, examples, and say, if this thing was happening, this is how you should rule. And then the job of judges in that time was to say, okay, well, if the case law says this, we'll use that precedent to intune what we should do in these other situations. That is how biblical law works, and that's why a lot of these laws can seem odd because they're very specific scenarios that are given that then the judges are to use to intune what they could be. I think we've already established that this text could not be less clear what the fuck they're talking about. So we kind of got to just take a flying leap at this. But the one thing that I keep coming back to when I think about what on earth could this possibly fucking mean, we end up with Levirate marriage. That is what I think this goes to. Now, what is Levirate marriage, you might ask? Well, I am here to help with that. See, as we get back to our whole thing about the most important thing being procreation and more kids, more kids, more kids, that is the main reason that, well, aside from misogyny, that the men were allowed to have multiple wives as well as concubines. Their job was to crank out kids. You needed as many kids as possible because God needed as many people as possible. And the only way God was getting people is if his people did the nasty. Well, let's say you've got a brother and your brother dies. But your brother dies before he has given his wife any children. So now you've got a widowed sister-in-law who is childless. In biblical times, that's about as bad as it gets for her. Like, she's now a woman that has been married, so she's not a virgin, which of course we know is hilariously prized among the peoples of the time. And she doesn't have any kids who would eventually be able to grow up and take care of her as, and provide for her. She's got nothing. So it was your duty to your brother to take his wife as your own, and above all else to make sure you impregnate her. And then when you do, you have to name the child after your brother so that your brother's name is not lost from the earth. And then help raise the child so that he can eventually take care of your brother's wife, or your brother's former wife, who is now your wife. That was called Levirate marriage. It was incredibly controversial even back then because a lot of guys didn't want their brother's wife because that's another person to take care of. That's another person to split their inheritance with down the line. So there's a whole famous story. He's a character I've thought about doing of Onan. He gets involved in this very exact scenario, and it's very dramatic. And it's very dramatic. I don't want to spoil that story. But basically, he doesn't do what he's supposed to, and God gets pissed about it. So, again, this was a big deal. It wasn't about sex. It was about making sure you have more kids. So, the way that I am interpreting that law was that basically, if your the way I've kind of interpreted it is maybe what if it's your brother couldn't have kids? And so the wife wants you to knock her up since your brother can't. And she gives you a boner because she's wanting you to impregnate her. Well, God says that's not how we do things here. You got to cut her hand off. Because at that point, you could look at it as the wife trying to insert herself between the two brothers, which the Bible takes brotherly bonds very seriously. That's about as clear as this gets. It is the weirdest text, and it's just, I don't even know what to do with it, but that's what we've got. So, that was your weird rule of the law. That one really, stumped me. I had no idea where it was going, but yeah. So, basically, we can take that it means either if two guys are fighting, don't grab their junk, which I'm okay with that being a rule, actually. I'm totally fine with that. Or if your husband can't get you pregnant, don't try to get his brother excited, which that's probably fair too. and that if you do, someone's going to cut your hand off. So, yes, that's all just I'm okay with it. I'm okay with no grabbing junk during fights. That is not okay, not bad. This is not a bad rule. It's a little extreme, but it's not a bad rule. And I think that's something to keep in mind here. I don't want to stay on this too long. We've got other things to talk about this morning, but I do think it's important to keep in mind that a big basis of Hebrew law was that the punishment should never be worse than the offense committed. So this seems extreme, and I know a lot of rabbis have wrestled with this exact rule because it does not say that she injures the man or anything like that. It doesn't say that she hurts him. So it seems odd that all it says is that she touches him and you're going to cut her hand off. And most Hebrew rabbis that I've talked to said that, yeah, that seems like way over the top on in the scale of, again, a big thing about biblical justice was that the punishment should never be worse than the crime. So it seems like the actual idea that you're cutting your hand off simply for the action of touching his junk is not there. And since it doesn't specifically mention, if two brothers are fighting and she grabs the guy's junk and now he's impotent, that you cut her hand off, because the Bible would have no problem being that specific, but yet it's not in this case. It seems that it's more got to be related to the Levirate marriage thing, and that, again, what did we learn last week, folks? Euphemisms, idioms. They're not actually talking about two brothers fighting in the street and a woman comes bursting out with the steel chair and hits them in the junk. Nobody's fucking talking about that. So fucking stop it. Stop cutting people's hands off over nonsense. Just tell your sister-in-law to keep her hands to herself. That, I think, is the real kick here. All right. I am buckling up for this because this is one we've had a lot of fun with the other ones. And this one we're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun pointing out how hypocritical and how bullshit Christianity has treated this next Bible story for the next umpteen million years. Hold on, I have to kill Lord Stanley off screen. He was trying to eat our HDMI cable, and that would just not be good for anyone. And so, but yeah, this one bothers me because there is a very, 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 I can't stress it enough, important story in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. A very important moral story. It has nothing to do with gays. It doesn't have anything to do with gays. An amazing quote that I read in researching this was from, I believe his name was Jay Matheson, but I may be wrong. He's a biblical commentator who is pretty liberal, as you would say, for biblical commentators. And thank you for the Lord Stanley counter, he is a dick. His quote was, "If you think Sodom and Gomorrah was about homosexuality, you must think that the Lizzie Borden case was about an axe." And that is just so spot on to what we're going to talk about here. And why people have been missing the point for centuries. This is not a cautionary tale about the fucking dangers of homosexuality. It's not. It's just not, people. We need to get that. If I beat one thing into your head this Sunday, it is that the next time someone uses sodomite to refer to gay people, as someone mentions Sodom and Gomorrah in any way, shape, or form about being about homosexuality, I want you to go the fuck off, because that is not what this is about. And we are going to prove it. And it is, you want to be a bigot, you could be a fucking bigot. I don't care. You don't get to be a bigot with this Bible story because you're just an idiot if that's what you think. All right? On my soapbox now, motherfuckers. All right. Where the fuck are Sodom and Gomorrah? Why the fuck are Sodom and Gomorrah? Why do we care? Let's dive in, folks. All right. If you remember last week, we were talking about our boy Abraham. It was during the Rule of the Law segment last week. And he lived in the plains and he was super successful. And God showed up with his two buddies and they told him, "Hey, Abraham, you're going to be the father of nations. We know your wife is really old and never been able to have kids, but trust us, buddy. You're going to be, the father of this great people. By the way, can we have some milk and veal and cheese? Nah, it's totally cool to eat those together." That was our story last week. I hope you all remember that. Well, that story took place in Hebron, as you see on my little map there. That's where Abraham was rich. Abraham was Jeff Bezos level rich at this point in the story. And so he had pretty much control of that entire Hebron Valley. He had a nephew that he was really cool with, named Lot. Lot was also super fucking successful. Huge flocks of, cattle and just doing really well for himself. Really well for himself. It got to the point that they both had so much that they couldn't graze their herds together because they were too big. So Lot says, "Uncle Abe, I'm going to head over towards Moab. I hear that the grazing is good over there." This already starts off a bad trend because, as you can see from your map, Moab is on the right side of the Dead Sea. Hebron is on the left. Generally, the Israeli people's Canaan was thought of as being more above and kind of to the left of the Dead Sea there. So Lot is basically saying, "I'm leaving the land that God is giving us because seriously, there's cool shit over there." So he heads over there. And he gets to Sodom and Gomorrah, which is part of a pentapolis with Admah, Zoar, and Bela. These are 5 cities that are all ruled by very minor kings who kind of run the city itself. They're not really kingdoms, they're just more city-states, if you will. And they're very wealthy. They're doing really well. And so Lot gets there, and he kind of fits into their society as he is also rolling dirty. So he's there, and, he's successful, but we're led to believe that maybe he's picked up some bad habits and that he's behaving kind of like the people there. And one of the things that we know about Sodom and Gomorrah from more than just the biblical record, from other record of time, they were known for their intense cruelty to not only the poor, but to foreigners. They did not like visitors. They did not take kindly to visitors. There are numerous accounts, not just in the Bible, but through all kinds of Hebrew text, about absolutely horrific things that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah did to people that were traveling. Some of them, they're insane. They go everything from putting travelers in beds that were too small, and when the person complained that the bed was too small, they cut their feet off so that they fit in the bed better. Murdering people, just again, absolute inhospitably. They were just treated everyone inhospitably. And if you remember, we actually talked about this again last week with JL. The Bible had made hospitality a big deal. That was the whole point about JL following God, is that she broke the most taboo rule ever. She did something, she violated hospitality, and that was to show you how dedicated she was to God, that she would violate this super, super important thing. And so it's kind of a big deal that she did that. So Why do people think this is about homosexuality? Because there's got to be a reason, right? Well, let's get into the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and see if we can help you understand why this would, have anything to do with it. Some say insane, others say efficient. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah goes like this. So we remember last week it was God and his two buddies, who are never named, that have a lovely meal with Abraham while God tells him that he's about to become one of the most famous people in history. After that, God sits there chatting with Abraham and goes, Sodom and Gomorrah has vexed me greatly. They're not cool. They do a lot of fucked up shit over there. Never does God mention the gays. God just says, they act like real dickheads. I don't like them. I think I should smite them. Abraham, knowing that his nephew Lot lives there, is a bit concerned. And he says, but God, would you smite it with all the decent people living there? He says, oh, sure, there's some assholes there. But there's good people there too. There's very fine people there. Would you smite it with those very fine people there? And God goes, how many fine people do you think actually live in those cities? Those people are dicks. And so Abraham goes, God, there's 50. There's got to be 50 people. I'll bet you I could go there and find 50 decent people. And if there's 50 decent people, would you not smite the city? And God's like, if you can find 50 decent people, I won't smite the city. Abraham then puts on a master class of negotiation. Some of the first haggling we've ever seen in the Bible. And Abraham is he's going one-on-one with God here in haggling. He starts at 50 and through a series of haggles gets God all the way down to 10. That if there are 10 decent people in this city, God is going to not bring the fucking banhammer down on Sodom and Gomorrah. We got from 50 to 10. Abraham is clear. That's how he got so rich. This guy is clearly a good negotiator. He knows his shit. So God says, I'm going to send my two homeboys here. Very likely they're angels. Again, it never says in the Bible who these two cats are. Just listen that they hang out with God himself, so they got to be pretty fucking cool. But we're going to go with that they're angels. God sends them to Sodom and Gomorrah and says, go find Lot and his family and see if you can find 10 decent people. Lot and 10 more decent people. Lot or 9 more decent people, however you want to look at it. And if you can find 10 people, I'll spare the city. If not, it's clobbering time. So our intrepid visitors head to Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot is chilling out in front of the city gate. We don't know if that is to give us the idea that somehow he knew that these guys were coming, or maybe Lot just liked to hang out outside the city gates, which seems kind of weird given knowing the city's reputation, but whatever. So the two guys come. They see Lot. We're given the impression in the Bible that Lot immediately knows these guys are special. He may not necessarily know that they're angels, but he knows that they're special. And he immediately says, you guys cannot be out here in the night. This is not a safe place for travelers. Come back to my house. You can rest. I'll give you food and water, and you can chill at my house, and you can continue on your journey tomorrow. They say, nah, we're just going to hang out in the streets. We want to get a lay of the land. Lot again presses them on this. He's like, guys, this is not the kind of fucking neighborhood you hang out in if you're not from here. It will end poorly. So he convinces them to come back to his house. They come back to Lot's house. Lot's there with his daughters, his wife, and he puts out a spread. And he welcomes them in. There's a whole scene about him washing their feet, which is, again, which is to contrast, to show you that Lot may be the good man. Because washing the feet of a stranger was a very symbolic act in the Bible that was done to show that they were your guest. You were almost being submissive to them and their needs. Lot does this, even though we've repeatedly been told how the people of Sodom and Gomorrah are not into helping out travelers. So clearly, again, what is being highlighted in the Bible here? that the traveler aspect is what is important, and foreigners and visitors and the other, that being friendly to the other is a big deal. Still no mention of homosexuality, but we're getting to that. So, the two guys are with Lot in his house, and it says that a mob shows up. Now, this is, kind of a big deal. So, what's going on? Let's look at the text. And there came two angels to Sodom and even. And even means evening. And Lot sat at the gate of Sodom. Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself and his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, and turn, I pray you, into your servant's house, tarry all night, and wash your feet, and shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, we will abide in the street all night. And then he pressed upon them greatly. And they turned to him, and they entered the house, and he made them a feast, and he did bake the unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom. Now we're going to stop right here for a second, because that is very important to what we're fucking talking about today. That little line right there gives away way more than people think it does. We are told that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah are gay, and that's why God hates them. Okay, first of all, how is this a thriving, bustling metropolis of nothing but gays? But that also hates visitors? Where the fuck would the people come from? If they're all gay, but they don't like visitors, how do they procreate? How does this city survive? It makes no fucking sense. Again, right there, this thing seems stupid that this is about gays. It's not about fucking gays. But, alright, so what does it say? The men of the city, even the men of Sodom. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. That means that the mob that is showing up outside of Lot's house is not just men. The men of the city does not mean the biological males of the city. The men of the city would mean the movers and shakers, the people that are important here, the socialites, the influencers, if you will, of Sodom and Gomorrah. Even the men of Sodom. Now we're talking about some guys. That's more saying the common guys of Sodom, the people who aren't as big a mover shaker. So we've got a pretty diverse mob out in front of Lot's house. And they surrounded the house, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. So basically the entire city has surrounded Lot's house. And they called unto Lot, and they said unto him, Where are the men which came to thee this night? Bring them unto us, that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold now, I have two daughters which have not known man. He's saying he has his two this, our fucking hero, ladies and gentlemen, is offering his two virgin daughters to be done with by the mob as they please, if they will leave alone these two guys that he just met. This is our fucking hero, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds like a real piece of shit to me, but let's go on. Let me, I pray, bring them unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. What Lot is essentially saying here is that he takes the rules of hospitality so seriously, and these men are under his protection because he has given them food and he has washed their feet in his home, that he would rather give his daughters to this angry mob than let something happen to those men, because that's how much he cares about hospitality. I don't think that makes him a good guy, but by biblical terms, that makes him a really fucking good guy. It's really fucked up. There's no other way to look at it. And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. So basically what that is, a very thee-thou way of saying, look, motherfucker, we want the foreigners that just showed up at your house will be the judge of what happens here. And if you don't give those guys to us, we will do worse shit to you than what we are going to do to those guys. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and they came near to break the door. So basically, how Christians have interpreted that fucking scene for many, many years is that what is being talked about is the idea that, pardon me, I have to, having a little trouble with my slideshow here. Yeah, so what Christians have taken that to mean for many, many years is that the men of the city wanted to have homosexual sex with Lot's visitors, and that's what God was mad about. That is the entire crux of the argument that this is about homosexuality, is that because this mob wanted to apparently rape these two guys that showed up in town, that clearly meant that that's why God smote them. Even though they this just boggles my mind. I'm sorry, this gets me worked up, and I'm trying not to lose my composure. So these two visitors show up that God sent there. The place has a reputation for hating visitors. The visitors get there. The people in the town apparently say they want to rape the visitors. And so, because they're men, that makes it gay rape, and that's why God melts the entire city. That is Christianity's take on this story. And if you are that dim that you buy that, please don't ever fucking watch my channel again. Don't ever speak to me if you know me, because you are so fucking dim, I can't deal with you. I'm about to deconstruct this now. But, I mean, even on surface value, does that make any fucking sense to you? That, like, there's no, because they want to rape these guys. Oh, well, if they want to commit a rape, and since it would be a gay rape, it must be the gay part that God's mad about. Not that God's mad about, the rape in general, or maybe God's, mad about the rape, or maybe God's mad about, the poor treatment of the poor and the foreigner. No. It's definitely about the gay stuff. Again, if you can't see that is just willful projection of bigotry, you're a fucking moron. So here we are. The word, because the big part of the text there is, give us those men so that we may know them. And that is what every Christian bigot has seized on for centuries, is that give us those men that we may know them. So, hey, there's new guys in town, we got to have gay sex with them. And that's apparently the entire idea, that all of Sodom and Gomorrah is gay, is because they want to rape these two guys. But do they even want to rape them? Do we know that for a fact? The word yada is the Hebrew word for no. It is used over 900 times in the Bible. 14 of them, it refers to sex. For those of you doing math at home, that's around 1%. It is generally used to mean a covenant, and it repeatedly describes your relationship with God. No you could look at it as like our word fuck. Let me use that for you and, explain. Have you ever gotten into a fight or been in a situation where you were about to fight someone? Perhaps the phrase, "I'm going to fuck you up," was said. Did you mean that you were going to have sex with the person? No, you did not. You meant that you were going to cause them physical harm. And you used the word fuck to mean that. But you could also say, "I would like to fuck you." And there, you are talking about carnal knowledge. It's the same word. It's the context. So, just because they said, "Send us out those men that we may know them," it could literally mean, send those men out so that we could fuck them up. because that's kind of what these people did to foreigners, was fuck them up. Now, did they want to rape them? I think they did. But it didn't have anything to do with gay stuff. It was raping them just as a power play, as a way to prove, motherfucker, don't come to our town. You come to our town, this is what happens, because nobody's welcome here but us. Why do I think that that was the case? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because this exact fucking story happened somewhere else in the Bible that has never been about gay stuff. What, Chad? That doesn't make any sense. How could the same exact story be somewhere else in the Bible and not be about gay stuff? I don't know. Let's fucking look at it, shall we? Judges 19:22-30. Our old book, the Judges. And now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth that man that came into your house, that we may know him. And the man, the master of the house, went out to them, and said unto them, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house, do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. This is the traveler that's with him, his concubine or mistress, whatever word you want to use there, his legal prostitute, whatever you want to call it. Then I will bring them out now, and humble ye them, and do what to them seemeth good unto you, but unto this man do not such a vile thing. Exactly, Kurt. It seems like the same fucking story, right? But the men would not hearken to him, so they took the concubine and brought her forth unto him, and they knew her and abused her all the night until the morning, and when the day began to spring, they let her go. So, let's follow this here. You know, there's little to unpack here. But what just happened? So, we have the exact same story, right? We have a traveler who came to a home. He was welcomed in and provided for as the laws of hospitality dictated. An angry mob showed up and said, we're going to fuck that guy up. And the person who was due to protect him said, don't do that. Take these women and do to them what you will. And so they did take the traveler's concubine and viciously, savagely raped her all night. I cut the rest of the story, but I'll summarize it for you here. The next day, the concubine is found laying on the ground in front of the home, having been ravaged. And God gets really fucking pissed. So pissed, he annihilates pretty much the entire tribe of Benjamin over this. Now, the wheels should be turning a little bit. Because that's the same fucking story as Sodom and Gomorrah. And God seems to be just as fucking pissed. But yet, this was not homosexual rape that happened. This was regular straight rape. Is that even a thing? Rape is rape, and it's just so awful. That maybe, just maybe, that's what God's fucking mad about. Maybe, just maybe, God is saying, don't fucking rape people, you douchebags, or I will fucking cream you. He doesn't care if you rape a guy or a girl. God's saying don't rape people in fucking general. Is that hard to wrap your head around? The only reason you wouldn't want to interpret the story that way is if you had an axe to grind against the gays. So you would maybe try to insert, oh no, it was because it was gay rape. That's what God was mad about. Even though we have the exact same story in the Bible that is very clearly pointing out that it's not this, that, and also I think it shows a precedent that, you know, dominating just about anybody who understands rape, crisis counselors, whatever, will tell you, rape is not nearly as much about sex as it is about dominance and violence and power. That they're not wanting to rape these guys because they're gay and they're into that. They want to rape these guys because they want to dominate them and humiliate them and subjugate them. That's why rape was used as a common tactic of terror in the time. We talked about Sisera and his raping army. God isn't into rape. It keeps coming up over and over and over here. Stop burying the lead with, oh no, it's about homosexuality. That's what God hates. God doesn't fucking care. God cares about rape. Stop raping people. That is the point here. Let's catch the fucking point, people. But wait, Chad, are you sure that's what God was mad about? How do you know that God wasn't mad about the homosexuality and the other stuff? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I am. I'm glad you asked. Because, oh, I don't know, maybe God could just tell us what he didn't like about Sodom and Gomorrah? Book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel, references Sodom and Gomorrah. And so surely he must say, remember Sodom and Gomorrah? God destroyed them because of the butt stuff. God didn't like all that gay stuff they were doing. Wait, no, that's not what he says. He goes, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, your sister Sodom and her daughters never did what you and your daughters have done. Oh, thank you, Oliver Trollsguard. I appreciate that. Welcome to the party, and you can leave. Because clearly you're a dick. So, Kurt, if you could ban him, that would be great. Now, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore, I did away with them as you have seen. It was the sin of your sister Sodom. They were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They had nothing. Not once mentioned there is gayness mentioned. What is mentioned? Being arrogant, overfed, unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. So again, this is not about homosexuality. This is not about the gays. This is about treating other people well. This is about being a decent person. This is not about that. Like, it's not hard. I don't know why people have to make this so hard. It's just really not hard to do. It's just simple. I don't understand why people have to make this more than it is. That's all it's about, folks. It's about hospitality. It's about being good to your fellow man. It's about not being a rapist. It's about treating people well, taking care of the poor, taking care of the sick. These are all the things that Sodom and Gomorrah didn't do. And these are all the things that Sodom and Gomorrah didn't do. And the fact that people want to turn that into a treatise on homosexuality, the people that, you know, if you want to make this about homosexuality, that's your bigotry that you are projecting there. That has absolutely nothing to do. That has absolutely nothing to do with. I can't even fathom it. I love that we got a troll in here who's upset that I'm saying not to hate gay people. So he also responded by being racist, because that tells you that right there, folks. I'm glad that dickhead joined us today, because that exactly tells you what this is all about. This doesn't have anything to do with actually caring about what God hates. This is about trying to twist what you hate into being the same thing as what God hates, so you don't have to feel bad about being a hateful piece of shit. You can instead feel like, oh no, I'm just following God's word. I'm doing what God asked me to do. So you can be like that dickhead and think that's what this is about. It's exactly what it's about. It's about trying to justify how you don't like gay people, and justifying, well, because yeah, you know, when you look at it on the surface, hating someone for who they love, that makes you really seem like a shitty person. So how could you make yourself not seem like a shitty person? By saying, oh no, It's about, it's about gay stuff. God hates gays. It says it right there in the Bible. He destroyed an entire city because of homosexuality, which he didn't. He didn't destroy those cities from homosexuality. If we're going to go with the belief that God actually did destroy those cities, he did it because they were uncharitable, because they were cruel, because they were vicious, and because they were dicks. You know what they weren't? I'm sure there were gays there, but they were not. It wasn't an entire city of homosexuals. And in their list of offenses against God, that seems to be the one that's not mentioned. That's not what God was bitching about. So were there homosexuals in Sodom and Gomorrah? Almost assuredly. There's been homosexuals in every tribe of mankind since the dawn of time. That's not what God's mad at. So stop pretending that it is. Let's just look at this broader than just homosexuals. Stop using the Bible to justify your bigotry. If you want to be a piece of shit, own it. Put it on you. Say, I hate this. I don't like these people. I don't like these things. That's fine. I don't like you. I don't want anything to do with you. But go for it, man. Do your thing. What you don't get to do is use the Bible to hide behind. You want to be a piece of shit, own it. Step up and admit that you're a piece of shit. Don't try to drag God into this with you and use it as a cover because you're too weak to admit that you're a bigot. That's been our Sunday sermon today. So go out and don't be like Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't be uncharitable. Don't be arrogant. Don't be unconcerned with your fellow man's plight. Do all of those things, and you will have actually understood the point of this story. And, Christians love, I gotta put one little thing on here. Christians love to talk, I hear it all the time. Fundamentalists especially. I don't mean to generalize when I use the word Christian, and I hope people don't take offense to that. Fundamentalist Christians love to tell us that God is going to judge America. And that, God is going to strike us down. And they will cite all the things they don't like. The acceptance of gay marriage, immigrants, all of these things. And I keep thinking that if God is going to strike America down, that we are acting a lot like Sodom and Gomorrah. Not the gay part. We are arrogant, we are overfed, and we are unconcerned with the poor and the needy. So, yeah, if you want to worry about, is America headed toward begging God to smite them? Well, yeah, it probably is. But again, not because of the bigoted things that you hate, but about the things that are repeatedly commanded to you in the Bible to do. To take care of the poor and sick, to be a good person, to be generous to the traveler, to help the foreigner. All of the things that the Bible tells you repeatedly to do, this story, these people didn't do it, so God smites them, and somehow we decide, no, it's about gay people. Yeah, it's not about the gays. It never has been. Methinks thou dost protest too much. So go out there and be like Lot. No, don't be like Lot. Because Lot, don't be like Lot. Be like someone who's not in this story. Because he was too busy doing all the good things, taking care of the sick and the poor, and being good to people, and being a decent person. Go out and be a decent person. Yeah, be like somebody better than Lot. Be like somebody that fulfills the tenets that have been asked for in this very interesting book. And stop projecting your negative feelings on God. God didn't... Yeah, thank you, Palm. Don't be not shit. It is that simple. That should have been the only commandment. We don't need 10. We need 1. Be not shit. It's that fucking simple. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. thank you for being here, everybody. And yeah, I'm actually so glad that we had a troll today. That really warms my heart because that means that he knows I'm right. Because he didn't challenge me on anything. He just made sure I knew that he was racist as well as bigot. So, you know what? If we're offending those kind of people, we're doing the right thing here. Thank you all for being with me this Sunday morning. Yeah, mention gay and people get all mad. Well, that's fine because gay people are people too, and I love people. I love good people. And so, you know what? Be good people. Go out there, love whoever you want to love, and just be good to people. Take care of the poor, take care of the sick, take care of the needy, help people. Not only will the world be a better place, not only will you feel better about yourself, but you will give God less reason, should he exist, to rain down upon us with space lasers. I love you, Palm. And by the way, I guess I kind of gave it away. Next week, we're going to talk about the Jewish space laser because there is precedent for the Jewish space laser. And we're going to go in to the Jewish space laser. We are also going to debut a new segment next week for our good buddy Lord Hux called Weights and Measures. We're going to talk about the obscure ass shit that is in the Bible that they use to measure stuff. Cubits, furlongs, rods, all that good stuff. We're going to really get into the conversion rates. We're going to do some Bible math, people. It's gonna be good. So yeah, we got Jewish space lasers and Bible math coming at you next week. It's going to be fun. But again, thank you so much for being here. Love your neighbor and everybody else around you. Even love that piece of shit that came in here spouting off his racist garbage. Because you know what? He's one of God's people too. And so we can hate him and love him at the same time. We love him as a human. We hate that he's a dickhead. But even someone like that piece of shit could be redeemed. He probably won't. But we can hope, right? Be good to everyone, everybody. Just be good to everyone. I'm just going to leave it at that.